This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Managing Director of Mac's List, and Jenna Forstrom, our Community Manager. This week we're talking about how you can create your own job online. Our show is brought to you by our book, Land Your Dream Job in Portland and Beyond. To learn more about the new 2016 edition, visit maxlist.org/book. You can also order the book at any of more than 600 Barnes & Noble stores across the country. Do you want to work at home? Thanks to the internet, jobs that used to require you to sit in an office can now be done online. These gigs can offer flexible or part-time schedules, and that can be important for people who need time for a family or other interests. But how do you get started? You can look for employers who hire online workers, or you can create your own job. Our guest expert this week, Sean Ogle, teaches people how to make a living online. Sean works with freelance writers, but the principles he shares apply to other occupations too. If you're not ready to strike out on your own, Ben has a list of websites to help you find employers who hire people to work remotely. And Jenna has our first audio question. It's from a listener who wonders how to use job titles on a resume. Now, Jenna, Ben, let me ask you too. Have you ever created a job for yourself or worked remotely?
I worked for a while as a freelancer, so doing work for other folks and working from home. And that was okay. It's definitely my second choice of work. I prefer the steady 9 to 5. And in terms of working remotely, I have to be honest, I find working remotely very difficult. Because it's really hard for me to separate kind of family obligations and work obligations. And I'll also be honest, I've got a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old at home, so coming to work a lot of times feels like a break for me. It's the vacation. So yeah, it's tough for me to work from home.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Jenna?
I own a business, a side project with a friend of mine, and it's definitely not a massive moneymaker, so I'm not quitting my day job yet, Max, so don't worry.
Hang on, Jenna. Mac's List started as a side project, so the future may be bright for you.
Yeah, so in like 11 years, maybe you'll get my 2 weeks notice. And during times where I've been freelancing like Ben, I've worked from home, and I've really enjoyed it, unlike Ben, because I get to snuggle with my dog and get a lot of work done at the same time. So I feel like it's productive on both fronts. But I can get how you can get conflicted between giving time and attention to your child. So if my dog gets needy, I just put him out in the backyard. I don't think really you can do that with a 6-month-old.
Well, for me, I've created a job for myself a number of times, obviously by starting my public relations company, Pritchard Communications, and Mac's List. And I also have worked on political campaigns as a volunteer and have come in and defined a role and ended up running fairly significant fundraising operations in addition to a day job. And so I like that entrepreneurial part of careers. I enjoy it. Working remotely, we do that here at Mac's List, and on Fridays we all work from our homes, and I kind of miss the contact with the team. So it's a big part of my week, but I do get a lot done on Fridays as well. I will say about working remotely, when I started my career in the 1980s, I had a job that took me to Central America, and this was in pre-internet time. And now when you go on a business trip, people expect you to answer your emails and be available all the time. In the early and mid-1980s, when I would go overseas, phone calls were prohibitively expensive. There was no email. So people didn't expect to hear from you for 3 weeks. And I would buy these enormous paperback novels that I'd always meant to read and never had time to do so, and I'd read them on the plane. Now I'm on the plane answering email, so it's a different world. All right, well, let's move on. Every week, Ben Forstag is out there searching the internet, looking for tools you can use in your job search. He finds blogs, podcasts, websites, and other tools. So, Ben, what have you uncovered this week?
So this week I want to talk about a blog post I found called The 25 Best Sites for Finding Remote Work. You know, the interest in remote working is certainly increasing, and I think it's pretty clear why. You know, in spite of my own reservations about it, I think people are really looking for flexibility, both in terms of location and their schedule. And in fact, Mac's List, the job board we run, recently added a remote working tab there. So employers with remote jobs can post on our site. So the site I'm going to talk about here is other job boards and other resources for finding remote work. And this comes from skillcrush.com, which is actually originally a site for learning online code and web design. But I think a lot of the resources they talk about here are applicable to just about any career set that you're looking for. So this is an array of websites dedicated to remote work opportunities. Remote work specific job boards, for example. We already talked about flex jobs in a previous podcast. But there are some other job boards out there focusing specifically on flex working. Sites for remote tech jobs. Tech is certainly an industry where remote work is, I think, increasingly the norm for programmers and so forth. Sites for finding freelancing contract work. So this is if you're doing your own thing as an entrepreneur, how you find those new gigs as a contractor. And other job boards like Idealist and The Muse, which have a lot of remote job opportunities. The one warning I'd have about this is that the last two sites that they include as remote opportunities are actually multi-level marketing opportunities. And this is like where I don't want to say any company names, but you pay to join the organization and you try to sell a product to other folks, and then they try to sell it to other folks and on down the line. And I know some people do really well with multi-level marketing, but most people don't. And so that's just my personal warning out there for folks. I don't think that's a real viable way to make a reliable living, personally. But other than those two sites, I think this is a great resource for folks who are looking for remote work opportunities.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. And as with any employer, whether it's online or bricks and mortar operation, you should always do your homework and your research and see if this is an organization that you want to work for and where you think you can make a difference. If you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him. You can reach him at his email address. It's ben@maxless.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and Jenna is here, our community manager, to answer one of your questions. And Jenna, what have you heard from our listeners this week?
We actually have a audio quote from Teresa Peltier, and her question is, do you think it's appropriate to change the job title on your resume? So we're going to play that now.
I have a question about changing your title on a resume. I am in a very specific role, and the title was given to me for a very specific reason. It's great for internal buy-in for the work that I do. But now, as I try to use that title on a resume to outside employers, it's kind of weird sounding and they don't immediately understand it. So I'm looking to change it just slightly to something more generic and more easy to read that an employer would immediately get. So do you think it's appropriate to change a job title on a resume?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for recording yourself. That's super cool. Teresa, thanks for sending that over. I think if you're applying for new jobs, you should definitely keep your original title. And then in the job description, or using the job description, tailor your cover letter and your resume bullet points to stuff that falls under that. So even though an employer might not see how the two titles are connected or resembling stuff, the supporting evidence and documentation will work out well. And I also think if an HR hiring company is calling to confirm your employment or ask for feedback and it says that you have a different role, that could cause some confusion, and then that questions your honesty and trust. So I would just keep it the way it is. But I don't know, Mac, Ben, do you have another opinion?
I'm actually going to throw out the counterpoint there, which is I think people get turned off by like overly esoteric language. And when it comes to a cover letter or a resume, you really want to be like smack people in the face with the simplicity of it and make it abundantly clear what you were doing. And I think if you've got a really kind of crazy title that's really super industry specific, but no one else knows what you're talking about, that's a liability there. So I would simplify it down to something that most people can understand. And then later on in the process, if they start calling up your existing employer or previous employer, you can say like, my job title was actually, Director of Client Experience for Interactive Solutions or whatever it is, but go in and kind of simplify it. And I think on your resume, you don't necessarily need to say this is my formal title. You can say this is really what I was doing. These are the activities and the projects that I accomplished.
I think honesty is the key here. And so there are titles that just don't translate well outside of an organization. I think about government, for example. Your formal job title might be Program Specialist 4. And if you put that on a resume, it doesn't tell the reader what you did exactly. So it could be that you were a program manager or a community manager or a communications director. So I think if you use a functional definition that is accurate and matches with the roles and responsibility in your position description, that is perfectly acceptable. The key here, though, to your point, Jenna, is you got to be honest. If you mislead the reader, it's going to harm your credibility, and you're not going to get very far in the job search process.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Teresa, for sending in your audio clip.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Teresa. If you have a question for Jenna, please email her. Her address is jenna@maxlist.org. Now, these segments with Ben and Jenna are sponsored by the 2016 edition of Land Your Dream Job in Portland and Beyond. We've made our book even better. We've added new content, and now we're offering it in the formats you told us you wanted. For the first time ever, you can read Land Your Dream Job in Portland and Beyond as a paperback, or you can download it onto your Kindle, Nook, or your iPad. Whatever the format, our book gives you the tools and tips you need to get meaningful work that makes a difference. See for yourself. For more information, visit maxlist.org/book. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Sean Ogle. A former financial analyst, 6 years ago, Sean Ogle quit his job. He moved to Thailand and he learned how to build a business online. Now through sites like Location 180 and Location Rebel, he helps other people learn the skills necessary to build businesses of their own, businesses that they can run from anywhere in the world. Thank you for coming to the Max List studio, Sean.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the trek downtown. So, our audience is made up of job seekers and people who are thinking about managing their careers. Why should people think about creating their own job rather than responding to job ads?
Well, it's, I went through a very traditional path in life. I got a finance degree from Morgan State University. I went into a job as a portfolio analyst. And very quickly, I realized that it wasn't giving me the freedom and the flexibility and, frankly, the money that I was hoping for. And granted, I started the job right at the peak of the market back in 2007. Everything collapsed in 2009, and I ended up leaving towards the end of 2009. But what I found is that there's alternative ways of doing things that can provide a better lifestyle or potentially provide more meaningful work that people just don't necessarily think about very often.
So people do think about starting their own job, but you didn't think about a bricks and mortar operation. You didn't go look at office spaces or start recruiting people in the community to come into a place from 9 to 5 or maybe 8 to 6.
Right.
You instead looked at building a business online. Why did you take that route, Sean?
Well, it didn't even start at first as me wanting to build a business. It was kind of me going through my quarter life crisis. So I left my job in finance. I ended up moving to Thailand and really just wanted to have an adventure. But the reason I went to Thailand was a guy found my blog, Location 180, and he said, I'm looking to bring an American guy out as an intern. I'll pay you $800 a month. I'll teach you how to do online marketing. You help me grow my business. You can have an adventure and grow your website in the process. And what I ended up doing was I learned how to do search engine optimization. So I learned how to get businesses and websites to rank higher in Google. And what I found was there was a huge market for that. So I didn't even necessarily go into the trip with the mindset of wanting to build a business. It was like, hey, I'm going to go have an adventure. I'll come back and I'll get a real job. But what I found was I learned these skills that were universally applicable, regardless of what type of work you're doing. And so I came back. I moved back to Portland later that year and built a freelance business. And so now that's what I've been doing, is kind of teaching people the same process that I went through to learn these skills and build a business, and helping them apply it to their own lives.
Now, what common challenges do you see people face when they start to go down that same path that you did, when they decide, okay, I want to build an online business? Yeah,
I think there's a few of them. One is picking a starting point. There's so much information out there, and for so many people, it's so daunting. They get flooded with information and different ideas and different strategies, and so they can't pinpoint down, okay, this is how I should start, because there's another 10 different people out there that are saying that's not the way to start. You should do it like this. I think finding the time is huge for a lot of people. They think it's going to be something that's going to take 60, 70, 80 hours a week, which it can, and you can put that much time into it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, that overwhelming in terms of time. And I think a lot of it is consistency. It's something you need to put the time into day in and day out. So even people that decide they're going to do it, oftentimes within even a matter of days or weeks, they're not putting in the consistent effort they need to be successful. So I think those are some of the biggest roadblocks that I see.
Okay. So set realistic expectations about the amount of time you're going to have to put into it, but be consistent, show up regularly, know that it's going to take some time. Let's talk more about time. Sean, what kind of timeline should someone expect to have in mind to go from having an idea to starting a business to actually be employed full-time by it?
I think that, 12 months is a good number to start with. It's obviously not going to be something that happens overnight. I have people that I've met through my website or have joined my program that end up, having a lot of success within their first month. Some people it takes 3 to 6 months, and some people it takes longer. A lot of it depends on, how devoted you are to learning the skills that you need, how much time and effort you're able to put into it every week, and a lot of it is, a little bit of luck. For some people, they can do the exact same or do the exact same things as one person, and it takes them 2 months, and, someone else can do those exact same things and it takes them 6 months. It kind of depends on just who you meet and, the opportunities that you find.
Now, you focus on freelance writing, search engine optimization, and online marketing. What are some other occupations that lend themselves to these kinds of online businesses?
Just about anything you can do. Any typical marketing activities can be done on a freelance or remote basis. So, freelance writing, freelance editing, search engine optimization, social media management, social media marketing, you name it, copywriting, all of those can be done on a freelance basis.
Okay. Well, so we've talked about having clear expectations, setting a timeline, the occupations that are possible. Mm-hmm. Take us through a typical process. I know you're in the business of teaching people how to do this, and I know you talk to other coaches and consultants as well. What are some common steps that people need to go through once they've made the commitment to starting an online business?
Yeah, so I think so many people think it's this big daunting process, and they're like, I have no idea how to do it. But what I try and teach people is essentially it's a 3-step process. So the first step is learning the skills you need to be successful online. So regardless of what you want to do online, there's certain skills that are just going to be beneficial to know. So, similar to the ones we just mentioned, copywriting, SEO writing, WordPress for business, social media for business, things like that. And if you can get to an intermediate level with any of those skills, Step 1, part B, would be to build a website in order to use that as your training ground to learn those skills. So it's great to read a book, but if you don't have a way to actually start applying them in the real world, then it's going to be really difficult to make any real traction. So learn the right skills, set up a website to do that. The second step is picking one of those skills that you excel at or you feel like you're interested in and freelancing it. So this is where you can build up your income, you can build up your confidence, and essentially start, making a little bit of money online that can then propel you into step number 3, which is applying it to the business you really get excited about. Not everyone is really interested in freelance writing, but I treat it like it's a bridge business. So it's not necessarily the end result, but it's something that can help you transition from either not having a job or having just been laid off, or if you're in a job and you're trying to transition into something else, one of these freelance businesses can help you make that transition. And so the third step would then to apply it to, maybe it's a hobby or a passion you get really excited about. Maybe it's e-commerce, professional blogging, app development. Those are all things that people have kind of gotten into later on. So that's the 3-step process that I try and teach, because I've seen it consistently work over and over, and it's really not as daunting as some people might think it is.
And let's talk more about that, because I can imagine a listener saying, "Wow, that's a lot."
Yeah.
And I enjoy writing, but I've never done a website. I think I know what WordPress is. I'm not sure how to find clients. When you reflect back, not only on your own experience, but on the people that you've worked with, how do they break that down and into a manageable process? What do you see people do?
Yeah, so much of it is the technology aspect scares everyone. Setting up a website, that sounds so difficult and hard, but these days it's literally you can install WordPress with one click on a hosting account. So that's kind of what I tell people to do first is buy a domain name, get a hosting account, and install WordPress. So if you're paralyzed with fear, you're like, I have no idea what to do those things. And, for the average person, even if you're completely, technologically illiterate, it'll take you an hour or two to do that. And that's a good starting point because then it's like, okay, I took an action. I've got something that I know I can start working on and start building these skills. I've got that training ground. So even if you have no idea what you might, write about or what kind of content you're going to put on the website, start with that because then that's going to allow you to more easily move into the next steps.
Okay. So there are a lot of online resources out there, coaches and books and courses. What's your recommendation to people about how to find out or evaluate what might be the best match for them if they're considering working with a coach or purchasing an online course that will teach them these kinds of skills?
There's a variety of different ways to look at it. Like I said, there's so much information out there that it can be tough to, decipher what's real or what's not or what's best for you. So what I would tell most people is go to locationrebel.com. I mean, that's the site that I put together to kind of help people figure out what's right for them. But also just, Google is your friend. If you have questions, start doing the research and you're going to get conflicting information, but you're at least going to have that information and you can kind of decide for yourself what feels right or what doesn't. There's so many people, so many legitimate people that are teaching others how to do this. A lot of it comes down to who do you resonate with? It's personality based. There's tons of people that can teach you the same general skills, but who's the one that you like their sense of humor, or the one that seems the most knowledgeable, or the one you can relate to the most? Finding someone that you can trust and then basically taking their advice and kind of ignoring everything else, I think is the right way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So do your homework, do your research, shop around, and look for the vendor, the book, or the course that it feels like the best fit.
Yeah.
Terrific. Now, when you, what are some mistakes that you see people make when they start down this road?
So I kind of talk about this 3-step process. The first being learning the skills, then freelancing, and applying it to your own projects. Not everybody, most people want to start at step number 3. They read the 4-Hour Workweek or a book like that, the idea of passive income and making money while you sleep, and that's the dream everybody has. And that's what I think that's what working online and online entrepreneurship, it has that stigma that it is this whole passive income thing. So I try and kind of break that down for people and say, hey, we can worry about that later on. Eventually you will get there, but you need to start with the essentials first. Because all of those types of businesses, whether it's affiliate marketing or online product creation, they're difficult. You really have to have a strong internet marketing and online marketing background. And the average person just doesn't have that. They haven't needed it. So that's why I recommend kind of starting with learning the skills first, doing freelancing, because especially freelance writing, because anyone with a high school degree or a college degree is going to be a fairly competent writer. And there's so many different types of writing work out there. So from super high-end copywriting to really basic called SEO writing. So I think that's one of the biggest things I make or the biggest mistakes I see is just having the wrong approach going into it, having the wrong mindset, and not starting with the basics.
Good. Okay. What else would you like to add, Sean?
I think the most important thing is to just remember it's not as hard as it seems. I mean, it's so daunting. And even if you have no experience doing online work, even if you've been for the last 6 months looking for a job and haven't considered doing something for your on your own, I think that it's important to keep in mind that people have been doing freelance work for decades. Freelance writing, graphic design, search engine optimization, online ads, whatever. And you don't have to necessarily be an expert. It's like, I don't have to be Jimi Hendrix to teach someone how to play guitar. You just have to be a relative expert. You have to be an expert relative to the person that you're teaching. Or teaching or working with. So if you're a writer, if you're a pretty good writer, you can then go and get writing work, even if you're not, a Pulitzer Prize winner. And so I think that a lot of people go with the mindset of I have to be, perfect. I have to be a total expert in these fields to be able to do work. And the reality is that just isn't true. And so if you can get over that hump and say, you know what, I'm going to start taking that first step. I'm going to buy my domain. I'm going to install WordPress. I'm going to get a hosting account. I'm going to set up what could become, my business's website and start learning these skills. I think if you can take those first steps, then most people are going to find it's like, oh, this is actually much more attainable and a little bit less scary than I initially imagined.
Great. Well, that's great advice and a great spot to stop at. Now, tell us what's next for you, Sean.
So I've got all sorts of things going on. I've got SeanOgle.com, Location 180, which is my blog. That's where you can get all the free information. Been doing that for 7 years. And I've got Location Rebel, which is my product and my community where I teach people that really want to like dig into this stuff. We're actually going to be combining them this summer. So putting the two together so people aren't getting lost going from domain to domain, and making it a lot easier to get the information that you're looking for. So that's the big thing that I'm working on.
Good. We'll be sure to include links to all of those sites in the show notes. And people can learn more about Sean at locationrebel.com. Sean, thanks for coming into the studio today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care. All right, we're back in the Max List studio with Jenna and Ben. So tell me, you two, what were some of the key points you heard Sean make?
There are 2 points that I really liked. One is his point about that it's hard, but it's not as hard as you believe in your mind. And I think that's true for a lot of things, but also it runs against this narrative that you often hear about like entrepreneurs who are working like 120 hours a week and they never see their family and, they're on the road 300 days a year. Certainly there are some folks like that, but the idea of building your business online is kind of the counterpoint to that. And I think Sean really astutely pointed out that like you don't need to throw your entire life into that building that business, that you can do it as the 40-hour-a-week job. The other point that he made that I really like, and this is another example of kind of getting out of your own head, was you don't need to be the world's biggest expert to market yourself as a freelancer or a contractor. That if you've got writing skills that are relatively better than everyone else, that's good. That's good enough. That will get you work. You don't need to be a Pulitzer Prize winner or the next Hemingway to get a freelance writing gig, for example. I think that's important. That's something I struggle with sometimes, thinking about my skills versus others.
Yeah, for me, one thing I really identified with was his point about just getting started and taking a step and then another step and a third step. Sometimes projects can seem overwhelming, whether they're in the office or whether it's starting your own business or getting the next paper done.
Or starting a podcast.
Yeah, or our online course for the fall. But if you break it into parts, you can make it happen. How about you, Jenna? What were your impressions?
I really enjoyed his talk about technology over fear and just like that, like wading into the water and how you can Google everything. And I think that's so true. Sean inspired me to start my beer blog way back in the day because he was getting free rounds of golf. And for a side project of his called Breaking 80. And while he loves golf and I could care less about golf, and that's a whole nother talk. I was like, well, what can I do that I can talk about? And I love beer and I love talking about beer. So I was like, I'll start a blog. And just that idea of just starting and then maintaining that process was really helpful and just definitely super inspirational. I also liked his point about seeking mentors. And I think we talk a lot about that when it comes to informationals or finding your dream job. Like find someone who's doing what you want to do and go out and get coffee with them. And that's so true for the online community too. So find someone who inspires you, reach out to them and like grow and learn or buy their products or whatever it is. But just that idea of like spend time with people you want to be like and not so much people you currently are like.
So Jenna, are you telling me you started your beer blog mostly as an attempt to get free beer?
100%. I'm totally transparent about that. It's worked out well.
So I'm waiting for the Ben Forstag baseball blog. To
Yeah,
help
Ben.
you get baseball tickets.
Tickets or get that major league invite to spring training. Yeah.
Or
It's
throwing a ball for the pitch.
Oh yeah.
That'd be
First
cool.
pitch. That would be cool.
Moral of the story, if you have an interest, pursue it and break it into steps and ask for help. Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Ben. And thank you all, our listeners, for joining us. If you like what you hear on the show, please help us by leaving a review and a rating at iTunes. This helps others discover our show and also lets us know how we can better serve your job needs. So one of the reviews we received recently is from a listener who uses the iTunes handle Melanie B. And she writes, "A seriously excellent podcast. I've had the privilege of attending Max List events in the past and chatting with Mac and the Max List team in person. And I can't convey just how helpful their information is to a young professional. Find Your Dream Job is such a valuable resource and delivers insightful, applicable tips that listeners can put to use right away. Well, thank you, Melanie B. We're blushing a little bit in the studio here, but we're glad the show was helpful to you. And thanks to the scores of other listeners who've left a review. Please take a moment and leave your own comment and rating. Just go to www.maxlist.org/iTunes. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Wednesday with more tools and tips you can use to find your dream job.